There was a few questions about modular RAG. Essentially, the idea is create a check and sync, throw all the possible things that you might need, and come up with a logic for how you piece them together as a Lego block for a particular scenario you have. That's how I've been designing products that we build for customers. And even SharePoint and Slack is architected like that, where there is a router that decides this is the type of question that is asked. We need this module, and that module. Let's stack them together and provide the response. Practically, if you have a bunch of modules that you're not deterministic how to interact with each other, it can get out of hand and chaotic very quickly.
I think eventually the word modular RAG or RAG itself as a term might change later on. What you're designing here is not just a model anymore. What you're trying to do here is not just a specific workflow anymore. What you're trying to do here is an actual system. Each of the module, you can see them as a primitive. A vector database itself can become a primitive. You can have multiple primitives created. There are so many possible primitives, and some of them may be not generative. There are many ways of designing these primitives, and I see two paradigms. Currently, a lot of people are just creating RAG within their standalone service. But if you start to work with other teams like application developer and DevOps, you might want to start thinking about larger picture in terms of your primitives. Sometimes as a scientist or ML engineers, you can expose these different primitives for application developers. And it's very interesting when you start seeing how other people design those.
One thing that we are doing that I think is interesting is that we started using Hydra, which is a library for configuration creation. Essentially, we create a lot of different modules and just use configuration files to determine which of them should be used in what scenario. And that makes application development so easy and straightforward. And still, you have all the advantages of the robustness that you want to have, because you could just layer in as many modules as necessary. Nicole spoke about post-processing of retrieved results in an advanced RAG set. He spoke about re-ranking that you can do, summarization that you can do. I'm seeing scenarios where the retrieved chunks have so much content, or they're very sparse. Let's say there are a bunch of tables, to the point that the model gets confused when it is generating that end result. There's so much or so little in a weird structure. So summarization is not useful. Re-ranking is not useful. What else can be used to process the information after retrieval if that type of confusion is the problem that the RAG system has?
That's a scenario that is quite often seen by people. So it depends on what kind of queries are being issued. In RAG 101 scenarios, maybe those are FAQs where the retrieval results have the direct responses to the question, and that's all okay. But as you go up the complexity ladder, the queries become more ambiguous, and also the retrieved context become more ambiguous. I call this the refined state of the RAG pipeline. You have the retrieved results and you refine them. Refining can include many things, including summarization or including creating notes. Summarization actually can help if the summarization is targeted. If it's not like, hey, just generate a summary out of these retrieved results, but instead having some more specific instructions to the summarization. In the end, you would want the results to convey certain information, like whether the answer to that question is directly included in the retrieved results or not, or whether it just contains some additional context that can be used by the LLM to generate the answer, or whether it does not contain anything at all. I think there needs to be an intermediate step where you have that spelled out using a smaller LLM, and then you generate that refined text, and that goes to your larger LLM.
One of the strategies that I've seen works really well in the cases where, for example, sparsity is the problem, where a relevant piece of information is all the way on the top of the chunk, and then the next piece is somewhere at the bottom in a table. Creating auxiliary chunks that are the summaries of those chunks with respect to a given question is an interesting way to handle it. Quickly, with the last question, I have a RAG system. It doesn't work. How do I go about figuring out what's wrong? What are the pitfalls that I might face? And what's the secret sauce of dealing with this problem?
That's the million-dollar question. The key is evaluation. Whenever you have some version of RAG setup, you need to know what works and what doesn't work. If you have established that, then you have a clear, transparent view into what is working, not working. Then you can easily figure out, okay, do I need to make a component change? Do I need to use a different LLM, make some prompt changes? Or do I need to fundamentally change a pattern of operation that happens within the client? That's really the first decision you need to make. The trick actually is to be disciplined and not make changes haphazardly, because when you do that, you have no idea what works. There are so many different moving pieces. You can keep building on all of these versions of RAG over time. You can always fall back to one of them later if you feel that there is something new I can do. The secret sauce is evaluation. The pitfall is you might not be able to find the right pattern. There are fundamentally two different patterns that you could use. Both of them could be good or not. So which one do I invest in? At some point, you need to take a leap of faith and see, okay, there are infinite patterns that I could use, but this is the one that I can move fast on. So I pick that. That's your greedy strategy. One of the things I explained in the talk is the reason RAG exploded, the barrier to entry was low and you didn't need to fine tune. But if you're moving in a direction where those advantages really become kind of shackles on your process, then it really defeats the purpose. So you want to focus on agility, evaluation, and quick decision making.
So your advice is be scrappy, don't be sloppy, which is something that I learned after many years of making mistakes in a startup. That applies everywhere. Also here, I think there is a lot of systems level thinking that goes into products like this. I see a lot of folks saying, I strapped LLM on top of the vector database and it doesn't work. Why? I thought that's how it works. Isn't that? So yeah, systems thinking, baby.